This week, we're talking about the revenue that you're actually losing from referrals as a specialty practice. You likely know you're losing referrals. It's a big conversation topic right now for most practices. But what you probably don't know is what it's actually costing your practice to lose those referrals. And that's what we're going to dive into today with some specific examples as well as an action plan. Because if you tune in every week, you know that you get an action plan within each of these episodes that you can take back to your practice and start to see traction and improve not only your referral process, but the revenue that you're losing along with it. So I always tell people I'm not a mathlete. I'm not a mathematician, but I can do marketing math really, really well. And that has been a saving grace for not only my business, but for my clients. And it's really important that you know the math when it comes to your referrals. And when we're looking at referrals, I read a couple of recent statistics in practices that lose just 3 surgical patients a week. That can lead to attrition of $18,000 a week. Now, I'm going to let you do the math as far as what that would be per year, but that's just 3. And that's on the very conservative side of the number of patients that you're losing from referrals every week is. We're going to dive into some more specialty numbers, but if you're looking at $18,000 a week, you're looking at just under $1 million a year that your practice is losing because referrals are falling through the cracks. So if this is you, stay tuned to this episode because you're going to want to dive into not only the math for your specific practice, but also ways that you can get on top of this without stressing out your team, without adding a bunch of more money to your marketing budget, and more importantly, without hiring more staff that you plug into a system that just isn't working. If we haven't met yet, I'm Alisa Conner, and I help both specialty medical practices and professional services organizations grow, not by outspending their competitors, but instead by creating both patient and client experiences that are worth talking about. So let's dive into this week's episode. And if you are in a specialty medical practice or any medical practice for that matter, you probably are very aware of the referral leakage problem. And it may or may not be hitting your practice really hard, depending on what kind of practice you have and how reliant your practice is on referrals. Most medical practices, especially outside of primary care and traditional medical practices, rely heavily both on professional referrals, but also personal referrals. Yet almost no practices I talk with have a system in place to process those referrals. And so oftentimes it ends up on either the practice administrator or the practice manager's already full to-do list. And that is part of the problem of why things are falling through the cracks. It is to no fault of theirs. It's just that the process doesn't exist. So if we look at what's actually happening within most medical practices, it looks something like this. You get a professional referral or a handoff from one of your partners, your referral partners, whether that's a primary care doctor or some other specialist that you partner with. And then it starts to go through the process. But there can be hiccups along the way, whether that's left in the hand of the patient who has taken on the responsibility to get back to you, or it has fallen through the cracks at your office because everybody's plate is full. It can be any number of reasons as to why that referral doesn't move forward. But what's scary is the revenue that's getting lost because that process doesn't exist. When there's no clear process, it doesn't encourage those referrals to come to your office. And most of the time they end up going somewhere else. Unfortunately, this means you're actually losing 2 things, not just referrals. Yes, you're losing the referrals and the potential revenue of those people who could become patients, but you're also dimming the relationship that you have with your referral partners. Because as things fall through the cracks, the level of trust that they once had with you diminishes every single time. And that affects your relationships with those referral partners that you've spent an enormous amount of time trying to grow and cultivate. It erodes them very quickly. And it takes a lot more time and attention to rebuild something where trust has been lost. But what you're going to find is that neither one of those losses shows up on any kind of report, whether it's a financial report or a marketing report, because there's no system to track what's being lost. And that is typical for any medical practice. I mean, you're not tracking something that you didn't know you should be tracking. What I find with many practices when I start to dive into an assessment with their practice is that they have a number of similar challenges across specialties. So you could be in veterinary surgery, you could be in ophthalmology, you could be in orthopedics, or even functional medicine. And you're going to struggle with these same challenges. You either have no process in place. So when a referral comes across someone's desk, whoever sees it first handles it, or they don't, one or the other. And there's no tracking metrics in place for where it is or who's handling it. It's just sort of whoever can get to it first gets to it. And oftentimes that means no one gets to it. The other problem I see within practices is that there's no process to follow. And so they don't know like what happens here. And then if it gets stuck here, what happens, who follows up on it? And is there a follow-up email that goes out to people? Or is there some kind of sequence that you need to follow to ensure that that patient actually gets in the door? And if that isn't happening, where is the ball being dropped and who's supposed to pick it up next? The other thing that I find is that with staff turnover and people that, call out because of sickness or kids or whatever it might be, those absences really affect that process. And there's no one there to pick up the pieces. So you have a process that's reliant on a team that everybody has their own way of doing it, but nothing has been put into a combined process so that somebody can walk in and pick it up if that person quits without notice, or if they are gone for an extended amount of time, or even go on vacation. That process completely falls apart and nobody knows what they were working on or who the referrals were. And I'm sure there's some kind of there's an attempt to hand that off to someone else, but everyone else's plates are full. And if you are struggling with keeping people on staff, like most medical practices are, that can just be one more thing that somebody adds to their daily list of tasks that they just can't get to. Unfortunately, who takes the brunt of this is either the practice manager or the practice administrator. And they get hit from all three sides. They get hit from patients who are frustrated because they can't schedule. They get hit from the referring providers who are wondering what happened to their referral patients that were sent over. And they get hit by the docs because the schedules aren't full. People aren't getting on the schedule from the referral partners, and they are being hammered all the time with this problem with no solution in sight. Let me ask you a question. If your best intake person were to quit tomorrow or take an extended leave of absence for whatever reason, what would happen to your referral process? Would it walk out the door with them? Would you be lost and not know where anything was? Because if that's the case, you don't have a process. You have a person that is responsible and keeps all of that knowledge in their own head, and you're going to be in a world of hurt when and if that happens. And I say when because it's more likely to happen than if. At the beginning of the episode, I referenced some specific revenue numbers. And I read some specific studies and wanted to dive into specific specialties from here on out. So the first one we're going to talk about is, again, in general, how I came up with the numbers. So on average, if your office experiences the loss of 3 surgical patients per week, and each patient is an average of $6,000 per patient, you're losing $18,000 a week in patient revenue. Now, you do the numbers on how many patients come into your office and how many referrals you are actually losing, as well as what a patient value is to your practice, because those numbers may be different. But if you took that $18,000 and you multiplied it by 52 weeks, it's close to $1 million a year that's walking out the door. And that is just based on a very conservative metric of 3 patients walking out the door and never coming back. In most cases, the number of patients that are being lost because of referral leakage is much, much higher. When I looked at the number of referral leakage statistics when it came to orthopedics on average, the average orthopedic office loses 2,600 patient referrals a year. If we were just to take a fraction of that number, just doing math off the top of my head, and you took 2,600 times 20%, that's somewhere around 720 cases a year. I'm going to let you do the math based on what you generate per case, but that's just at 20%. That's not even likely the percentage of what you're losing. It's well over 7 figures a year. And that could be costing you not only the additional support that you need for your team, but it could be costing you that brand new doc that's coming up and you can't afford to hire them, and numerous other things. And so this is a really big problem. And most people do not assign revenue to the number of patients leaking out the door, especially when it comes to referrals. So I want you to draw your attention to those numbers and actually do a little math for yourself to determine even conservatively what that looks like for your office. And in orthopedics specifically, referrals are on the decline, and there are ways to fix that problem. And we're going to talk about a few of those in just a few minutes. The other area that I looked at was functional medicine. Now, functional medicine is a little bit different because they don't necessarily have the professional referrals that other specialty practices might have. A lot of their referrals are word of mouth or other patient referrals and things like that, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the same challenge, because they also normally do not have a process around their referrals. And so when I pulled the numbers for functional medicine, they were a little bit different because this is all self-pay, typically self-pay and not insurance backed. And also, so the patient investment is a little bit lower, but also functional medicine practices don't typically have the same patient load as other specialty medical practices might have. So on average, what I found was that functional medicine practices have around 25 new patients a week, depending on the number of docs in the office. So that's around 1,300 per year. And that with functional medicine, that the value of functional medicine is built over time. So most people are not going to come in and sign up for everything that the office offers at one time. You have to build trust with that person, and then the revenue increases over time. So you need to take that into consideration when you're doing these numbers. Like, your first time patient is not going to be the same value as somebody who is a longer term patient if they get there. And that's another struggle area for functional medicine, is that they don't have a patient journey designed around keeping people in their programs. So that's another unique perspective, is where you're also losing money there. So if we look at also their attrition rate being between 15 and 20% of those 1,300 patients per year, that can represent hundreds of thousands to even $1 million a year over lifetime value for those patients. And that is significant, especially because patients are paying out of pocket. And a lot of functional medicine offices struggle with generating consistent revenue or keeping their revenue flowing because they don't have processes built not only around referrals, but around retaining their current patients. So it may appear that there's quite a big difference between specialty medical practices, and the mechanism for which how they work with you could be different. But the starting point where the referral leakage begins is the same, regardless of specialty. It's when the referral comes in to the point where you can build trust with that referral and their first contact entry point. So if somebody's coming in and they don't feel like they can trust you with their health moving forward in a surgical capacity, what are the chances they're going to become a patient? Slim to none. Even more so, that can be exasperated when it's in functional medicine, because this is something they are paying for without having insurance to assist with those costs. So if you're not 100% building their confidence and trust within your organization right away, they're not going to stick around as a long-term patient. And that is really where your revenue starts to be generated from. The last area that I looked at was veterinary surgery. And this is a little bit different than a typical veterinary practice, because these are doctors that are working on very specific high intensity cases for animals. And most of their patients are going to come through a general veterinarian. And so if they don't have a process in place that makes those referrals feel like they are seen and well taken care of, and that the office is reporting back to the general physician that referred them, you are breaking trust all over the place. And especially if that isn't established right away, your referrals from those general physician veterinarians is going to dry up quickly. And that is the basis of your business. So you need to ensure that you have a process in place that makes those referring doctors as well as their patients feel like they have come to the right place, that they're going to be well taken care of, and that there's follow through on both, not only the referring doctor end, but also the patient end. Now, I give you these specific examples for different practices because I want you to see it doesn't matter which type of specialty medicine you're practicing. They can be from one end of the spectrum to the other, but the referral leakage problem is a challenge for each and every specialty, and they each just need a different approach that is built on a very similar foundation. When we talk about reporting and why this doesn't show up on reports, and a lot of times I will run into this when I'm running an assessment for a medical specialty practice. And oftentimes when I ask them a specific question of what's happening with referrals, they just give me the deer in the headlights look because they don't know, because there is no process, because no one has ever asked them that question before. And so what I have determined is that almost never are referrals being tracked as a type of pipeline. It's almost as though the referrals that come in are an expectation and a little bit taken for granted, which is why a process doesn't exist around them most times. Now, there are definitely exceptions to the rule, as is always the case, but most often, if referrals come through the door, they specifically aren't tracked until they come in the door and have a patient, and they're never tracked as lost. And that's based on a few things that we went through already. One is time, one is overwhelmed staff, and the third is, most importantly, there's no process in place to do so. And so oftentimes those lost referrals just look like variations in the schedule, like maybe surgeries are a little lighter. And some of those things can be dependent also upon times of the year and can be specific to the type of medicine that's being practiced. Of course, a lot of people try to get in, for example, for orthopedics at the end of the year because they want to use up their deductibles. But there are also schedule fluctuations that are not expected and seem to be random. And that is because those referrals are falling through the cracks and nobody's taking care of them. And then when it is finally noticed, everyone goes into panic mode and they try to fix the problem in specific ways that we're going to go through in just a second that are not necessarily the fix to the problem. And at that point, everybody that's in the administrative staff for the practice is getting yelled at because no one took care of filling the calendar and making sure that the schedule was at capacity. Ultimately, it's the practice manager or practice administrator who feels the brunt of this because they know there's a problem. They know that it happens consistently, but they also don't know how to fix it or how to name it. So let's dive into how practices typically try to fix this problem. And it would make sense, the tactics and strategies that they put forward to fix the problem, if they actually were directed towards fixing the problem. The first is they try to spend more money on marketing. For example, I audited a orthopedic practice, and the first recommendation their marketing agency gave them was, we need to spend more on ads. But when I questioned them about where most of their patients were coming from, the answer was referrals. Yet they didn't have a process or system around how to move more referrals and ensure that more referrals were going through the system. Instead, the answer was, we're going to spend more on marketing. When you're looking at spending money on marketing, you're looking at attracting new leads. The difference is that referrals are already coming to you as a lead, and you're not paying them the same respect that you would to someone who's coming in brand new who doesn't even know who you are. And they're much more likely to turn into a patient. So why haven't you designed an experience for them specifically to make them feel as though they are as special as they are? The second place that practices will end up throwing money in hopes to fix this problem is by adding more staff members. But where this goes awry is that the current staff members are already overwhelmed and they don't have a process to follow to fix the challenge. And so you're just plugging more bodies into something that's broken, and it's not fixing the challenge. The third place that I see practices try to fix this is by investing in new technology, whether that's medical record software or CRM or whatever that might be. But ultimately, software is just a tool to be used in alignment with the process. And if the process doesn't exist and no one knows what the process is, you will likely find that the technology you're trying to implement is only going to amplify the problems you have and not fix them at all. So how do you actually fix this? That's probably the question you're asking yourself at this point, is like, we've tried all of these things. She's hitting all the buttons. How does she know? And it's because I've looked at so many practices and seen the challenges that they all have and the things they've tried to do in the past to fix them. The best way I found to fix this is by creating a specific journey around your referrals, both your referral partners and the actual referrals coming into your office, based on something that the hospitality industry utilizes. And I've created my own version of that called purposeful hospitality. And it is creating and designing an experience from beginning to end for your referral partners and your practice as a whole. The practices that implement and adopt this type of journey for their practice see revenue amplify and increase rapidly and beyond anything that they've tried in the past. And it's because you are putting intention behind every patient journey in your practice. And when you do that, it's not only felt, it's experienced, and it makes other people want to share that journey with others in their circle. One of the things I hear most often from practice managers and practice administrators is they can't get their docs or their leadership team on board with fixing the referral problem. Nobody wants to address it. They just sort of throw it under the rug and hope somebody on their administrative team will handle it or assume that it is being handled. But when they can go to the practice owners and the leadership team and even the docs and say, did you know we're losing almost $900K a year just in referral loss? It kind of stops their brain for a minute and makes them pay attention. So I encourage you to take those numbers, do your own math for your practice, and take the loss numbers to your docs and see if it helps open the conversation on how to fix the problem. Let's do a quick recap of what we talked about today. The first thing that we discussed was that the loss for referrals is not just some random number out there, percentage, but it's actually measurable, and it equates to a lot of revenue loss, like substantial revenue loss into millions of dollars. And so when we pay it the respect and attention that it deserves, we can then not only identify the problem, but we can choose to create a solution to that problem. The second thing that we talked about was that there's no ill will around losing referrals. It's not because somebody did their job wrong, but more often it's because there's no process that exists around how to process referrals. Or if there is a process, only one person owns it. And that is a dangerous place to put all of your eggs in one basket, because if that person decides to leave or something were to happen with that position, there goes the process. And so if you don't have a process or your process isn't documented fully and others can't jump in to assist, you don't have a process and you need to create one. And then the third thing we talked about is the fix to the problem isn't just throwing money at tactics, and it's not necessarily even expensive, but it does have to be intentional, and you have to want to focus on that journey, not only for your referral partners, but for all of the patients that walk through your door. So if you tune into the Profit Show regularly, you know that every week I try to give you an action plan. This week is no different, so let's dive into this week's action plan. The first thing I want you to do is go and calculate your referral loss. Go and put a number to the percentage of referrals that you are losing every single week, and see if it makes you fall on the floor out of your chair. And how you do that is you take the total number of referrals that you typically receive and you multiply that by 20 or 30%. That's on average the number of people that will become patients, it's a conversion number. It could be higher, it could be lower. 20 to 30% is just a general safe number that you can use to multiply. Take the total number of referrals you receive, multiply it by 20 or 30%, you choose your number, and then multiply that by your average case revenue. So if that is a surgical case and your average case revenue is $6,000, then you would multiply that number by 6,000, and that's going to tell you exactly how many referrals you lose in a week, in a month, a year, whatever you decide to calculate. You can't start to fix a problem if you can't identify how big the problem is. And so those numbers are going to reframe the way that you look at referral loss. The second action step you can take is to identify 2 to 3 places where people are going from a heck yes, we can't wait to work with you, to a silent no, we're going to go with someone else. And that could be lack of attention, that could be hard to schedule, that could be any very variable number of things. It's up to you to go and identify that throughout your practice and see what that is. And then to create an action plan to just try to fix one of those things. You're not going to be able to fix everything. And doing that audit regularly will uncover new things that are happening, because as you start to become aware and start to fix things, and new things are going to pop up. So that's step number 2. And step number 3 is, after you do your math on those referral numbers, is to put those numbers in front of the powers that be within your practice and say, hey, we're losing this much in referrals this month. What are we going to do to fix it? Because when I can guarantee you, when you put those dollar amounts in front of those leadership position eyeballs or the docs eyeballs, they will start a popping, and they will pay attention, and they will find the time, resources, or people to help fix this problem and get it off of your back. And so get your numbers together, put them in front of your people, and then look at, where you're starting to lose people. That's your action plan for this week. If you made it to the end of this episode, you already know the math isn't mathing, and you know there's a problem, and you most likely don't know how to fix it. And you specifically don't know how to fix it on your own. This is the exact reason I created the Referral Recovery Lab, which opens on June 4th for the very first time. I am accepting 20 founding members who are practice administrators in specialty medical practices. That is the criteria. If you are not those people, this is not for you. You can tune out, and I'll see you next week. But if you are a practice administrator or practice manager in a specialty medical practice, you might want to listen up for just a couple more minutes. This is a roundtable that I'm putting together for practice administrators and practice managers to discuss all things referral and to work side by side with me to come up with solutions for your referral leakage problem. We are going to meet, and we are going to dive into one specific problem together until we come up with a solution. Now, I'm limiting this to 20 spots because it gives me the capacity to be able to work with people one-on-one. And what's great about this is that you also get access to the knowledge and insights and perspective from all other specialty medical practices, whether they're yours or not, and you're going to learn a ton from the people in this group. Now, as a founding member, you are going to get access to this lab at the lowest price it will ever be offered. And that's because you get the unique perspective and opportunity to help design and put this together so that it works not only for you, but includes all of the things that you want it to include. You're going to get lifetime access, and currently I only have the wait list open. So it is going to open on June 4th, but the people that sign up on the wait list with the link below the video or in the description, one of the two, you'll find it in the description or below the video, are going to get first dibs. So if you are interested, I highly recommend getting on the wait list, because the people on the wait list are going to get access to the spots first. And then when those spots fill, they're full. The program will close, and then it will relaunch again later at a different price point. So if you're interested in getting on the wait list, please click below on the link, and we will work together as a team and as a community to solve the referral leakage problem for your practice. If you're on the fence about jumping into a solution, I want you to just go look and see where you're going to be in 3 months with this problem. And if it is somewhere around $72,000 or $50,000, is that not worth taking a look at trying to fix it? That could be someone's salary. That could be one more person to help take things off your desk. So if you're ready to fix the problem and you want an expert by your side to help guide you through creating that process for your referral partners and also your practice, I can't wait to see you inside. Click the link below and get on the wait list. In the meantime, thanks so much for tuning in this week. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, be well, see you soon.